Ethan froze halfway up the staircase. Someone was singing in his son's room, but his son had been mute since birth. What happened next shocked everyone and set off a chain of events no one saw coming. Stay with me. This is a story you need to hear. Before we start the story, comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching from today. And if you find this story impactful, don't forget to subscribe for more. The rain came slow and steady, like someone turning a great gray wheel above the city. Its sound on the windshield was steady enough to think about, but not loud enough to drown memory. Michael Grant drove with his window cracked a little, letting the damp night air press against his face. The scent of wet pavement and cut grass mixed with the faint, sweet smell of the leather in his car. He held the steering wheel the way he held most things these days, tight as if a slip might let everything tumble out. His house waited on the hill beyond the city lights, a pale shape softened by the rain. From the road, he could see the house's tall windows shining like eyes. The place was large enough that it never felt quite like his until he walked through it. Tonight, returning earlier than planned, he noticed how the gravel made a small, scattered music beneath his tires. He liked that sound now, a fragile rhythm that kept him honest about the moment. Inside, voices were muffled. The house received him first with the smell of lemon polish and the muted echo of expensive things. The walls had art that cost more than whole neighborhoods. The floors measured him in footsteps, and the rooms held themselves like people who knew their positions. Michael moved through them like a guest in his own life, used to polite intervals and scheduled intimacy. He carried a folded stack of papers from the office, numbers and signatures and schedules that wanted more of him. They had followed him home like small, insistent ghosts. Michael was 52, his hair salt and pepper at the temples, his skin weathered in the way of a man who had spent many nights awake. He had built an empire from restless hours and cold decisions. He wore suits that fit like promises, watches that kept time for others. People called him a visionary at dinners and a tiger at meetings. They did not see the small things, the way his thumb worried the edge of a photograph when he was alone, or how he always left the TV on low during the nights he returned late. There was a particular stillness in the house that night, a careful holding of breath. Michael stopped at the foot of the main staircase and looked up. The long hallway was lit by a single sconce. He could feel, before he heard anything, the sense of distance. It was in the curtains drawn against the rain and in the soft, measured steps that belonged to someone else. For a moment, he allowed himself the blank space of wanting to be different, to be present, to speak words that would be enough. He told himself, as he sometimes did, that tonight would be one of those evenings. He would call Samuel down for dinner. He would set aside the papers. He would step into the small living room where the piano sat and remember why he had built all of this. Samuel Grant was 9 years old and lived in a world of measured quiet. He was a small boy with the same deep-set eyes as his father and a mouth that rarely opened beyond the minimum. If anyone had wanted to describe him quickly, they might have said he was polite and observant, an old soul tucked into a child's body. People who were not family mistook Samuel's silence for shyness. Michael knew it for something else, a wall he had not learned how to climb. It had been there long before the house, before the suits and the deals, but his absences had built the mortar between them. Michael felt that wall like a pulse beneath his own skin. He had watched therapists and tried books of advice. He had paid for solutions that promised quick fixes, tutors, specialists, elegant rooms full of toys meant to coax a voice out. Nothing had been quick, and nothing had been a solution. Samuel's silence sat in the center of the family like an unfinished sentence. Sometimes Michael imagined that if he could find the right note, the right tune, that quiet would break and a voice would come out like water from a long-closed spring. He set the papers down on a side table, smoothing them as if he might iron life back into alignment. The house answered with a soft clink from the kitchen and the sudden, small sound of someone moving across the polish of the hallway. Just enough to be noticed, not enough to prompt concern. Michael breathed out, half relief and half disappointment. He had intended to be home later. Business had asked for one more hour, a few signatures, a call that could not wait. But something in his chest had tugged at him today, a low, surprising pull. He had gone to the office to finish the work earlier, to send the final contracts off, and then he had found his hands empty for the first time in a long while. The emptiness had felt dangerous, and he had driven home. As he walked further into the house, he noticed small signs of life. There was a child sneaker by the door, a tiny proof of presence. On the mantel, among the photographs of boardrooms and awards, there was a photograph he kept almost hidden, a small, sun-struck picture of a beach, Michael holding a toddler in his arms, both laughing. He traced the edge of the frame with a finger and felt the faint warmth of memory. That photograph had become a private concession, something to remind him that he had once known ease. A soft hum pulled him toward the sitting room where the piano lived. He had bought it before Samuel was born, a statement piece more than an instrument, polished walnut, keys like teeth. It sat as a promise that music could live in a house of contracts. Tonight the keys were covered with a light dust cloth, but the stool beside it was pushed back, as if someone had just stood up. Michael stood in the doorway and watched the dim shape of the house. He listened to the rain, the distant city, and the small domestic noises that meant nothing and everything. In that listening, memory arrived as sound, not a word, but a single moment when Samuel had once reached up to touch Michael's collar and giggled, a sound so sharp it made the room spin. He moved through the rooms with the careful awareness of a man trying not to wake a sleeping animal. The kitchen held the faint scent of lemon and warm bread. Someone had left a kettle cooling on the stove. There was a small note on the refrigerator in childlike handwriting. "Daddy, home soon? Sam." The heart inside Michael's chest tightened. He had not expected it. He stooped to read the note again, touching the paper like it might be a clue. He thought about the work waiting in the other room, and then folded his shoulders inward and let it go. He would be here. He would stand where that note had asked him to stand. For a second he imagined Samuel opening the door, eyes bright, a voice like a bell falling into place. He allowed himself the impossible, a hope keeper. A house is made of rooms and also of silence. Michael had learned to count those silences like coins. Some silences are golden. The quiet of a child sleeping after laughter, the hush of a family at peace. Others are leaden, the soft, heavy pauses that happen when words are kept for fear of breaking something important. Michael could not tell which of those the house held tonight. He only knew that the rain put the world on hold, and that he had come home early because, for once, the pause felt like the place where something could happen. He set his hand on the polished piano lid and felt the cool wood. The house seemed to hold its breath with him. Outside, the rain pressed at the windows like a question. Inside, Michael felt the long ache of wanting a sound that would change everything. He did not yet know what sound might come. He only knew he had returned with an open space and the fragile, foolish hope that he might finally belong to something smaller than his empire. The night settled deeper, swallowing the hill and half the city below. The rain had thinned to a whisper, the kind that made the house seem bigger, emptier, lonelier. Michael stood by the piano, still holding the note from the refrigerator between his fingers. The ink had smudged slightly under his thumb, as if time itself wanted to blur the question his son had written. "Daddy, home soon?" He whispered the words aloud, as though saying them might summon the boy from the shadows. "I'm home, Sam." The words floated, caught between silence and memory. A small sound broke the stillness, faint, almost imagined. A note, one soft piano key pressed down somewhere behind him. Michael turned sharply. The piano lid was still closed. The sound came again, one low key, held longer this time, followed by another, higher, gentler, like the start of a melody that hadn't decided what it wanted to become. Michael's breath hitched. He stepped closer, his shoes barely whispering against the marble. The keys were moving, not wildly, not random, slow, careful, deliberate, like someone learning to speak after years of silence. For a heartbeat, disbelief rooted him to the floor. Samuel. It had to be. There was no one else in the house. Michael reached for the light switch, flooding the room with a warm amber glow. And there he was, Samuel, small and still, sitting on the stool, in his pajamas, bare feet touching the floor. His hands rested lightly on the keys, his head tilted as though listening to something no one else could hear. Michael's chest constricted. Sam. The boy didn't turn. His fingers drifted again, pressing one white key, then another, forming a fragile tune. It was hesitant, like memory, like something he had always wanted to say, but never could. Michael stepped closer, afraid that any movement might break whatever fragile spell held his son in that moment. He hadn't seen Samuel at the piano in months. The boy usually avoided it, watching others play, but never touching the keys himself. Yet tonight, in the amber half-light, he played as if the world had stopped holding him back. Sam, Michael said again, his voice quieter now. You're playing? The boy's hands paused. Then, for the first time in years, Samuel turned his head and looked at his father directly. His eyes shimmered with something Michael couldn't name. Not fear, not joy. Something older, quieter, recognition perhaps. And then, in a voice as faint as the rain outside, Samuel whispered, "She taught me." Michael froze. She. His heart skipped once, then again. His throat felt tight. Who taught you, Sam? The boy's eyes flicked toward the stairs, the shadowed hallway beyond, then back to the piano. He pressed another key, a deep note that seemed to hum through the floor. She comes when you're gone. Michael's blood went cold. He crouched beside the piano bench, searching his son's face. Sam, who comes when I'm gone? But the boy didn't answer. He just kept playing soft, uncertain notes that seemed to form a melody from some invisible memory. Michael felt the hair rise at the back of his neck. The room had changed, subtly, almost imperceptibly. The shadows seemed heavier now, the air thicker. He turned toward the hallway, half expecting to see someone standing there, but it was empty. Only the quiet ticking of the clock broke the silence. He forced a small smile, trying to hide the unease curling in his stomach. You mean your music teacher? Samuel shook his head. Not her. Then who? She hums, the boy said softly, like the wind. The words chilled him. He reached for his son's hand, but the boy flinched, fingers pressing another note, sharp, dissonant. The sound seemed to cut through the air like a warning. Michael drew back, startled. Then, almost as quickly, Samuel slid off the stool and stepped away, his face blank, distant. She doesn't like when you come home early, he said quietly, and before Michael could respond, the boy turned and ran up the stairs, leaving his father alone with the echo of that eerie tune. Michael sat there for a long time, staring at the piano. She doesn't like when you come home early. The words looped in his mind, each repetition tightening around him like a rope. Who was she? A game? A lie? Or something else? Something that reached into the quiet places of his son's world? He rose and followed the boy upstairs. The hallway lights flickered slightly, just a pulse, a hesitation, and he cursed himself for noticing. The door to Samuel's room was ajar. Inside, the boy was already in bed, eyes closed, breathing steady. Michael hesitated in the doorway, then stepped in and pulled the blanket up over his son's shoulder. Good night, Sam, he whispered. The boy didn't respond, but just as Michael turned to leave, he thought he heard it again, that soft humming. Not from Samuel, but somewhere else. It was low, almost tender, and it came from the direction of the piano downstairs. He froze. For a moment, he thought about going back, about checking the room again. But a strange heaviness pinned him there, the kind that comes when fear mixes with exhaustion. He told himself it was nothing. The wind, the house, the the storm easing off outside. Still, as he walked down the hall, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't entirely alone. He poured himself a drink in the kitchen, the amber liquid trembling slightly as it met the glass. He sat at the counter, staring at nothing, until the grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight. Then came the sound again. A single piano note. Clear. Soft. Impossible. Michael's hand tightened around the glass until it cracked. He stood, heart pounding, and went back to the sitting room. The lights were dimmer now, though he hadn't touched them. The piano lid was still closed, but on top of it, something hadn't been there before. A small white envelope. No stamp. No name. Just his initials written in elegant cursive MG. Michael picked it up slowly, feeling the strange chill of paper that seemed too cold for the room. Inside, there was only one line, written in ink so faint it looked aged. She sings when the truth is near. He stared at the words until the edges of the note blurred. The house seemed to listen, waiting. Somewhere upstairs, Samuel shifted in his sleep, murmuring something inaudible. And then, from nowhere, that same quiet humming again. Low, melodic, heartbreakingly human. Michael turned sharply, every instinct screaming that someone was in the room with him. But there was nothing, just the piano, the envelope in his hand, and the faint echo of a child's unfinished melody drifting through the walls. He stood there in the half-light, the words repeating in his mind. She sings when the truth is near. Whatever this was, it wasn't random. It wasn't harmless. And deep down, Michael knew. The truth his son's silence had been guarding all these years was about to surface, and it would not be kind. Morning came slowly, as if the house itself was reluctant to wake. A pale gold light spilled through the curtains, softening the edges of the night before. Michael hadn't slept. He sat at the kitchen table, elbows on the polished wood, the untouched cup of coffee gone cold beside him. The envelope lay open in front of him, its single cryptic line staring back like an accusation. She sings when the truth is near. He'd read it so many times the words no longer felt real. He told himself he'd dreamt it, that it was some strange trick of fatigue. Yet every time he closed his eyes, he heard it, that faint, lingering hum drifting through the corridors as though the house itself had begun to breathe. He ran a hand over his face, exhaling sharply. "I'm losing it," he muttered, completely losing it. The sound of small feet on the stairs broke his thoughts. He looked up to see Samuel standing there, still in his pajamas, hair tousled, eyes bright but distant. For a brief second, the boy looked exactly like he had when he was little, soft, open, unguarded. "Morning, buddy," Michael said, forcing a smile. "You're up early." Samuel didn't respond right away. He stood at the bottom of the stairs, fingers curled at his sides, studying his father as if trying to decide something. Then he asked, "Did you hear her too?" The question cut through the morning quiet. Michael's heart lurched. "Who, Sam?" The boy tilted his head slightly, voice barely above a whisper. "The lady. She was singing again." Michael's throat went dry. "When?" "Before the sun came," Samuel said, simply. "She said she was sad for you." Michael tried to breathe, to find words that would make sense to either of them. "Sam," he said carefully, "was this a dream?" The boy frowned. "No, she doesn't come in dreams. She comes when the house is quiet." Michael reached across the table, trying to sound calm. "Listen to me, okay? If anyone, comes here when I'm not home, you tell me. Right away. Promise." Samuel hesitated, then nodded, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a kind of wary distance. "I promise," he said softly. Michael tried to smile, but the air between them was brittle. He glanced down at the envelope again, then back at his son. "Sam, did you put this here last night?" Samuel's gaze followed his father's to the envelope. He shook his head slowly. "She left it." "Sam, that's not—" "She said you wouldn't believe me." The boy interrupted, his tone calm, almost eerily so. "She said you don't hear what I hear." Michael's mouth opened, then closed. He wanted to argue, to dismiss it, but the memory of that faint humming still pulsed in the back of his mind. He pushed back from the table, pacing. All right, maybe I need to call Dr. Elkin again. Maybe. Samuel's expression changed. You think I'm making it up? No, Sam, I didn't say that. Yes, you did, the boy said, voice trembling now. You think I'm lying because I don't talk like other kids. Michael stopped cold. The words hit harder than he expected. That's not true. Samuel's hands clenched at his sides. You never believe me, Dad. You never stay long enough to listen. Michael's shoulders sagged. For the first time, he didn't know how to defend himself. Sam, I don't know how to listen when you won't talk to me. That silence that followed was sharper than shouting. Samuel's lip trembled, but he said nothing. He turned and walked toward the piano room, bare feet whispering against the floor. Michael followed, helplessly drawn. The boy sat down at the piano again, fingers hovering above the keys. He pressed one, a low, steady note, then another. It was the same haunting melody as last night. Sam, Michael began, his voice rough. Who taught you that song? Samuel didn't look up. She did. She said it's your song. My song. The boy nodded. She said you used to hum it when you were happy. Before. The air thinned around him. Michael took a small, unsteady step back. He hadn't hummed since Claire died, his wife, Samuel's mother. And that song, he had written it years ago, when Samuel was still a baby, a lullaby no one else knew. His chest tightened. Samuel, he said quietly, when you say she, do you mean your mother? Samuel looked up then, truly looked at him, and for a fleeting second, something flickered behind his eyes. Pain, fear, a desperate longing. No, he whispered. Mom doesn't come anymore. Michael's voice faltered. Then, who is she? The boy pressed another key. High, sharp, almost painful. You'll see soon. And before Michael could speak again, Samuel slipped off the stool and ran upstairs, leaving his father frozen in place. By noon, Michael was sitting in his study, trying to lose himself in work. Numbers, contracts, anything concrete. The storm of thoughts in his head wouldn't still. Every so often, he glanced at the piano room through the glass door, expecting to see movement. Nothing. Just sunlight on polished wood. The housekeeper, Martha, arrived around 1. She was an older woman with kind eyes and a voice that always seemed to know when to soften. Mr. Grant, she called from the hallway. I didn't expect you home today. Is everything all right? Michael forced a polite nod. Yes, just needed a quiet day. She smiled gently, setting down her coat. It's good for you to take one. Then, noticing the untouched food on the counter, she frowned. Didn't you eat? He shook his head. Not hungry. Her eyes softened further. And Samuel? He looked tired when I checked on him this morning. He's fine, Michael said a bit too quickly, just imagining things. Martha hesitated. Imagining? He sighed, rubbing his temples. He says someone visits him when I'm not home. A woman. Says she sings to him. The housekeeper's expression shifted. Not with disbelief, but something quieter, sadder. He said the same thing to me once, she murmured. Michael blinked. He did. She nodded. Months ago. Said she stood near the piano. I thought he meant his mother. A long silence stretched between them. Michael leaned back, his pulse quickening. You never told me. Martha hesitated, then said softly, You were traveling so much back then, sir. I thought maybe he was just missing her. Michael rose from his chair, his voice low, tight. She's gone, Martha. I buried her. She can't be standing by the piano. I know, Martha said quietly, but grief doesn't always stay where we leave it. Her words lingered like fog. After she left, Michael went back to the piano. The lid gleamed under the afternoon light. For reasons he couldn't name, he lifted it open. Inside, lying across the black and white keys, was a single long strand of hair. Golden, the same shade Claire's had been. His knees almost buckled. He reached for it, but just as his fingers brushed the strand, the piano emitted a soft sound, a chord he hadn't touched. A whisper filled the air. Not words. Just breathe. Just sound. And from upstairs, a small voice called down, trembling and certain all at once. "Dad, she's here again." Michael looked up toward the staircase, heart pounding, the golden hair still coiled in his shaking hand. And for the first time, he wasn't sure what frightened him more. The impossible presence in his house, or the feeling that Samuel wasn't afraid of it at all. The afternoon dimmed too quickly, the kind of early dusk that made the house feel smaller, more claustrophobic. The clouds hung low and swollen, and the sky outside turned the color of tarnished silver. Michael stood at the bottom of the stairs, frozen. Samuel's voice, "Dad, she's here again," still echoed down the hallway, soft but steady, too calm for what it meant. He forced his legs to move, each step up the staircase landing heavier than the last. The polished wood creaked beneath his weight. "Samuel?" His voice broke the stillness. "Where are you, buddy?" No answer. Halfway up, a chill rolled through the air. Not a draft, but something more deliberate, as if the house itself had drawn a breath and decided to hold it. He reached the top landing. The light from Samuel's room spilled out faintly, flickering, like the bulb couldn't make up its mind. He pushed the door open. Samuel sat cross-legged on the floor beside his bed, the music box, the one that had belonged to Claire, turning slowly in his hands. Its gentle tune wove through the air, a lullaby Michael hadn't heard in years. His throat tightened. "Where did you get that?" Samuel didn't look up. "She wanted me to play it for you." "Who did?" The boy lifted his eyes, calm, distant. "The lady who sings." Michael's chest constricted. He took a step closer. "Samuel, that music box was locked away. Where did you find it?" She gave it back. The boy said simply, "She said you shouldn't have hidden it." He knelt down slowly, trying to keep his voice even. "Sam, listen to me. That box was your mother's. I put it away because it reminded you of her, and I thought it hurt too much to see it." Samuel looked straight into his father's eyes, and there was something older there, far too knowing for a 9-year-old. "It doesn't hurt her," he said. "She said it hurts you." Michael's pulse stuttered. "Samuel, stop." But the boy just turned the crank again, letting the melody play. It was soft, almost delicate, but beneath it there was a faint distortion, a second, buried sound that didn't belong. A whisper. Michael leaned in, listening. The whisper grew clearer, layered under the tune like a hidden track. It wasn't Samuel's voice. "You promised me forever, Michael." He jerked backward, so fast he nearly fell. The room swayed. What did you just say?" Samuel blinked. "I didn't say anything." "Who told you to say that?" Michael's voice was breaking now, half fear, half fury. Samuel's expression softened, almost pitying. "You did." A wave of nausea swept through him. He snatched the music box out of the boy's hands and snapped it shut. The tune cut off mid-note, leaving an awful echoing silence. "Enough," Michael said, his tone trembling. "No more games. Do you understand me? No more." Samuel's eyes darkened, filled with something unreadable, not fear, not sadness, something like cold comprehension. "You don't want her to talk to you," he said quietly. "You're scared of what she'll say." Michael's breath came shallow. "Who is she, Samuel?" The boy's answer was simple, too simple. "The one you left." A sound rose in Michael's ears, blood, memory, the pulse of guilt he'd buried for years. He stood abruptly, clutching the box like a weapon, and stumbled out of the room. The hallway spun around him. He made it halfway down the stairs before his knees gave out, and he had to grip the banister to steady himself. The words repeated in his mind like a curse, "The one you left." He went straight to his study, slamming the door behind him. His hands shook as he set the box down on the desk. He opened it again, carefully daring the tune to start, but this time there was no whisper, just that fragile, lullaby, sweet and distant, the one he had once written for Claire. He poured himself a drink, his fingers trembling so badly that half the whiskey sloshed onto the table. He swallowed hard, his throat burning. The phone rang, making him jump. He stared at the screen. Emma Callahan, his assistant. He picked up. "Emma." "Mr. Grant, are you all right?" Her tone was hesitant, uncertain. "You left the office in a hurry yesterday, and you didn't answer my texts." "I'm fine," he said, though the words sounded hollow even to him. There was a pause. "I came by this morning to drop off the contract you left on your desk. Your housekeeper said you were home, but you didn't answer the door." Michael frowned. "You were here? When?" "About 9, she said. I didn't want to disturb you, but I thought I saw someone through the window." His blood ran cold. "Someone?" "Yes," she said. "A woman. I just assumed it was Mrs. Grant." Michael's grip tightened around the phone. "That's not possible." Emma hesitated, her voice lowering. She looked pale, blonde hair, wearing something white. She was standing by the piano. He couldn't breathe. His hand began to shake. "Michael?" Emma's voice sharpened with concern. "Are you?" He hung up. The silence that followed was suffocating. He turned toward the doorway. For an instant, he could have sworn he saw it. A shadow shifting at the edge of the room, a flicker of white fabric disappearing around the corner. He bolted from his chair, following the sound, footsteps light and deliberate descending the stairs ahead of him. He rounded the corner into the piano room and stopped dead. The piano lid was open again, the same golden hair coiled neatly across the keys. But now there was something else. A photograph propped up on the music stand. It was of him and Claire, but not from their wedding, not from any family album. This one had been taken without his knowledge. He was sitting at his office desk, hand resting over another woman's, Emma's. The back of the photograph had writing in that same delicate cursive. "You promised me forever. You lied." Michael's stomach dropped. His mind splintered open, memories flooding in. Claire's last night alive. The argument. The secret he had buried under money and silence. The affair he had told no one about. He backed away, heart pounding, the air turning heavy and electric. "Samuel," he shouted, voice cracking. "Samuel, come down here." The boy appeared in the doorway, clutching the banister. "Yes, Dad." Michael pointed to the photograph, voice trembling. "Where did this come from?" Samuel looked at it, then at his father. "She wanted me to show you. She said you'd understand." "Understand what?" "That she never left," the boy said. His tone was calm again, too calm. "You did." Michael's knees nearly gave out. The room swam. The piano, the photograph, the hair, the music, all of it pressed in on him. He stared at his son, unable to form words. Do you think this is her? You think your mother's doing this?" Samuel tilted his head, expression unreadable. "Don't think," he said softly. "I know." The lights flickered again. The piano let out one trembling note, then another, and somewhere in the shadows, a woman's voice began to hum. Not from the piano, not from a room, from right behind him. Michael turned slowly, breath caught in his throat. But there was no one there, only the faint scent of Claire's perfume, and a whisper brushing against his ear, soft and certain as a promise broken long ago. "You shouldn't have come home early." The morning after the storm felt unusually quiet. The mansion, so full of polished surfaces and expensive silence, now carried a different kind of stillness, like the air had absorbed every unspoken thought from the night before. Ethan sat at the edge of his bed, elbows resting on his knees, watching the weak sunlight crawl across the marble floor. He hadn't slept. In his head, the sound of Adam's voice, his son's voice, still echoed faintly, like an impossible dream he was trying to replay. The boy who had never spoken a word had sung. It was supposed to be impossible, a cruel fantasy of an overtired mind. Yet the memory was too sharp, too alive to be imagined. Downstairs, he could hear soft clinks, the sound of coffee cups, cautious footsteps, the careful hum of a household pretending everything was normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. His wife, Claire, hadn't spoken to him since the previous night. When she entered the room, her eyes no longer held warmth. They carried a heavy, fearful question she wasn't brave enough to ask aloud. Ethan stood and walked to the window, his reflection ghosting against the glass. Outside, the world seemed peaceful, the trimmed garden, the white fence, the sea of autumn leaves. But inside, everything was unraveling. When he finally walked downstairs, Claire was already there, seated at the long dining table. Her posture was perfect, her hair tied neatly, her expression rehearsed. The kind of composure that hides panic. "You're awake," she said softly, not looking up from her cup. "Barely." A pause followed, stretched thin. Ethan poured himself coffee, ignoring the tremor in his hand. "Where's Adam?" "In his room. He hasn't said a word since." Ethan nodded slowly, staring into the dark liquid in his cup. "You heard him too, didn't you?" Claire's fingers tightened around the porcelain handle. I don't know what I heard." "Don't do that, Claire," Ethan said, his voice low, controlled. "Don't act like I'm imagining things." He sang, "You know he did." Her eyes flicked up then, shiny, wet, afraid. Maybe it was just the wind. Or a sound from the hallway. "Stop." His tone sliced through her words. "Our son spoke. For the first time in his life. And now you're pretending it didn't happen?" Claire's composure cracked for a moment. She set her cup down with trembling fingers and whispered, "Ethan, you don't understand. There are things I never told you. About him. About the night he was born." The words hit him like a chill. "What are you talking about?" Before she could answer, a soft, rhythmic sound interrupted the faint melody of humming. It floated down the hallway, fragile and pure. Ethan froze. Claire went pale. "That's him," Ethan whispered. "That's Adam." They rushed toward the sound, hearts pounding. It came from Adam's room, where the morning light fell across scattered toys and a half-finished drawing. Adam sat on the floor, eyes closed, swaying slightly, humming a tune too beautiful for words. Ethan dropped to his knees beside him. "Adam? Son, can you hear me?" The boy opened his eyes, calm and distant, as though he were somewhere far away. His lips parted, and for a brief second Ethan thought he would speak again. But instead, Adam whispered one word. "Gone." Then silence. Ethan's chest tightened. "Gone? What's gone?" But Adam only stared past him, as if watching something invisible fade away. Claire stood by the door, tears brimming. Her voice trembled. "He's remembering." Ethan turned sharply. "Remembering what?" But Claire didn't answer. She backed out of the room, leaving Ethan kneeling by his son, confusion and fear churning inside him. Later that day, Ethan drove into the city, needing answers. He went to the specialist who'd been treating Adam for years, a neurologist named Dr. Grayson. The man looked startled when Ethan described what had happened. "That's extraordinary," Dr. Grayson murmured. "If what you're saying is accurate, it defies every diagnosis we've made. Adam's vocal cords are functional, but his brain showed no sign of speech coordination. For him to suddenly speak or sing is impossible." "Impossible," Ethan repeated bitterly. "You doctors love that word." Dr. Grayson leaned back, studying him. "There might be something else at play. Has Adam been under any emotional stress lately? Any changes in his environment?" Ethan hesitated. "His mother's been distant. We both have. Sometimes trauma triggers unexpected neural responses. It could unlock suppressed abilities or memories." "Memories?" Ethan frowned. "He's just a child. Children remember more than we think." The doctor's tone darkened, especially when they're trying to forget. The drive home felt endless, each word replayed in Ethan's mind. Remembering trauma, forget. What was Claire hiding? Why had she looked so terrified when Adam spoke? When he arrived, twilight had fallen. The house was dimly lit, quiet again. But he noticed something odd. Claire's car was gone. In the living room, a single envelope lay on the coffee table. His name written in her delicate handwriting. With shaking hands, Ethan opened it. "Ethan, there are truths I should have told you years ago. I kept them buried because I thought it was safer that way, for Adam, for all of us. But now the past is coming back, and I can't stop it anymore. Don't look for me tonight. I need to do something before it's too late. Claire." Ethan read the note twice, his heart sinking deeper with each line. The clock ticked loudly in the silence. He could feel the mansion closing in around him, the walls, the secrets, the whispers of the night. Somewhere upstairs, Adam began humming again. This time, the tune was darker, almost mournful. Ethan turned toward the staircase, fear twisting inside him like a blade. Because this time, he recognized the melody. It was the same song Claire used to sing when she thought no one was listening. Rain began again that night, slow, deliberate, almost thoughtful. Each drop struck the mansion's tall windows like quiet knocks, as if the storm itself demanded to be let in. Ethan sat motionless on the couch, the letter still clutched in his hand, his eyes fixed on nothing. He had been waiting for hours. The clock's steady ticking felt cruel. Every minute that passed stretched the silence into something unbearable. Adam had fallen asleep upstairs, curled against the glow of his night lamp, still humming faintly in his dreams. That same haunting melody, Claire's song. When the sound of tires crunching gravel finally came from outside, Ethan's chest tightened. He rose to his feet, heart pounding, watching through the window as headlights swept across the driveway. Claire's car came to a stop. The engine cut off, but she didn't step out right away. For a moment, she just sat there, her face pale behind the glass, her hands gripping the steering wheel. Then, slowly, she emerged, clutching something close to her chest. When she entered the house, she looked like someone who had already crossed a line she couldn't come back from. Her clothes were soaked, her hair clung to her face, and in her trembling hands was an old wooden box. "Where have you been?" Ethan's voice was sharp, but underneath it was desperation. Claire didn't answer. She set the box down on the coffee table, her eyes glancing toward the staircase, toward Adam's room. "Is he asleep?" "For now. Claire, what is this? What's going on?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked at the box like it contained her confession, her punishment, her truth. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't mean for you to find out this way." Ethan stepped closer. "Find out what?" Claire unlatched the box with shaking fingers. Inside lay a bundle of old photographs, a small silver cross, and a folded hospital wristband. Ethan picked it up, reading the faded writing under the fluorescent light. "Baby, unknown, 2009. He frowned. "What is this?" Claire's tears finally came. "That's not Adam's original band." The world tilted. "What do you mean?" She sank into the couch, her hands trembling uncontrollably. The night Adam was born, there was a storm. Power failures all over the hospital. I'd been in labor for hours, drugged, exhausted. When I woke, they handed me a baby, quiet, perfect, so peaceful. But later that night, the nurse came in crying. There had been a mistake. 2 infants switched in confusion. They tried to fix it before anyone noticed. Ethan felt his breath leave him. "You're saying Adam isn't ours?" Claire nodded, sobbing. "I refused to give him back. I couldn't. The other couple never returned to claim their child. They disappeared after that night. I told myself it was fate, that God meant him for us." The floor beneath Ethan seemed to vanish. Every memory, every photograph, every moment of Adam's silent life twisted inside him like glass. "You lied to me. For 11 years, Claire. You lied about our son." "I wanted to tell you," she cried. "But when I saw how much you loved him, how you looked at him even when he wouldn't speak, I couldn't take that from you." Ethan turned away, his hands gripping the edge of the table. His reflection in the dark window looked like a stranger. That's why he doesn't speak, isn't it? Because somewhere inside he knows. Before she could answer, a faint sound drifted down from upstairs. A voice. Ethan froze. Claire looked up, eyes wide with disbelief. It was Adam. He was singing again. But this time, the melody wasn't gentle. It was pleading. Urgent. They both ran upstairs. Adam stood by the window, the curtains fluttering wildly behind him. The night wind made his hair dance like a flame. He was singing words this time, broken, scattered, but words nonetheless. Find her gone mother? Ethan's heart pounded. Adam, who are you talking about? Adam's eyes opened, and for the first time, they didn't look like a child's. There's an eerie calm, knowing. She's still waiting, he whispered. Claire's voice shook. Who, baby? Who's waiting? Adam looked at her, and then, almost tenderly, reached toward the box on the table. Her, he said, the woman who sang me to sleep before you. Claire gasped, stepping back. No. Ethan looked between them, confusion and horror twisting together. Claire, what is he saying? Her face turned pale as chalk. The nurse, she whispered. The one who disappeared after that night. Her name was Grace. She was the one who took the other baby, but she never left town. Claire's voice cracked. She used to come to our house sometimes when you were away. She wanted to see him, just to know he was safe. Ethan's blood ran cold. You let her see our son? I thought she would move on. But she said she could hear him hum when no one else could. Thunder rolled outside, shaking the glass. Adam's voice rose again, clear and haunting now. She's here, he said softly, pointing toward the dark hallway. Both parents turned. And there, at the end of the hall, stood a figure. A woman, soaked from the rain, her face hidden in shadow. In her hand, a silver cross glinted under the faint light. Claire screamed. Ethan stepped in front of Adam. Who are you? The woman stepped forward, her voice calm but broken. I'm the one you should have called Mother. Everything collapsed at once. The lies, the years, the silence. The truth hung between them like smoke. Ethan's breath came hard. You're Grace? She nodded. Her eyes went to Adam, tears streaming. He remembers my song. I used to hum it when the storm scared him. He was mine before he was yours. Adam walked forward slowly, unafraid. You came back, he whispered. Claire's knees buckled. Please don't take him. I raised him. I loved him. Grace shook her head. He doesn't belong to anyone. He belongs to the truth now. The lightning flashed, and for a heartbeat, all three adults stood frozen, their faces illuminated, guilt, grief, and longing intertwined. Then Adam began to sing again, louder, stronger, and the sound shattered the silence like a spell breaking. The lights flickered. The storm outside seemed to calm. And when the echoes faded, Grace was gone. Only Adam stood there, eyes closed, whispering one last word. Peace. Claire fell into Ethan's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. The air felt lighter, almost sacred. Somewhere, the house exhaled. The storm had passed. Ethan looked at his son, their son, whatever truth lay behind him, and whispered, You saved us. Adam didn't answer. He didn't need to. He just smiled faintly, the way only someone who finally understands does. And in that fragile moment, Ethan knew that the sound he had heard that night, the song of his silent son, wasn't just a miracle. It was forgiveness. The rain had stopped by dawn. What remained was a fragile calm that stretched across the mansion like the first breath after drowning. The world outside glistened under the pale light, raindrops clinging to window panes, the garden shimmering as though washed clean of every secret. Ethan stood by the window, watching the sunrise bleed through the mist. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about his wealth, his business, or the endless noise of his life. His thoughts were still, suspended somewhere between grief and peace. Behind him, the house was quiet. Claire was asleep upstairs, exhausted from the night that had torn their world apart. Adam lay between them, his small hand resting over his mother's, breathing softly, as if the storm had taken something dark from within him when it left. Ethan turned as the first light touched Adam's face. His son stirred and opened his eyes. There is no trace of fear, only calm recognition, a quiet understanding far beyond his years. "Morning, Dad," he whispered. Ethan froze. The words were so natural, so unforced, that for a moment he didn't even react. His throat tightened. "Say that again." Adam smiled faintly. "Morning." It wasn't a dream. His son had spoken. Not in a trance, not in song, but in the simple way a child should. Ethan's vision blurred. He knelt beside the bed, pressing a trembling hand to Adam's cheek. "You don't know what this means to me." Adam looked at him, steady and sure. "I do." Claire stirred then, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw Ethan crying silently beside their son, her lips parted in disbelief. "Is he—" Ethan nodded. He spoke. She covered her mouth, sobbing quietly, the kind of sound that comes not from sadness, but release. Years of guilt, of buried truth, of love wrapped in lies, all melting into that single miraculous moment. Hours later, the house filled with the scent of coffee and sunlight. Everything felt softer. Yet beneath that peace, Ethan's mind kept circling the same question, the one that wouldn't let him rest. Was it right to forgive? After breakfast, he found Claire sitting in the garden, a blanket around her shoulders. She looked small against the wide green lawn, her hair glinting in the early light. He joined her quietly. For a long while, they said nothing. The only sound was the faint chirping of birds and the rustle of leaves. Finally, Ethan spoke. "Do you ever think about her?" Claire didn't have to ask who. "Every day," she said softly. "Grace. She wasn't evil, Ethan. Just lost. The night I took Adam home, she must have realized what had happened. But instead of coming for him, she came for me. She said he'd sing one day, not for her, but for the truth." Ethan's gaze drifted to the horizon. "And he did." Claire nodded. "I think she came to free us. Maybe that's why she disappeared." He turned to her. "You should have told me, Claire. You should have trusted me." Her eyes filled with tears. "I was afraid you'd see me differently, that you'd hate me for keeping him. I know it wasn't right, but he was mine. The moment I held him, I knew I couldn't give him away." Ethan's voice softened. "I don't hate you. I hate the silence. It destroyed everything before he even spoke." She smiled weakly. "Silence protects you until it doesn't." They sat there a long time, letting the wind carry away the words that had once been too heavy to speak. Later that afternoon, Ethan walked into Adam's room. The box Claire had brought back, the one that had started it all, still sat on the shelf. He opened it again, running his fingers over the photographs, the cross, the hospital band. Among the items, he noticed something new, a folded note tucked beneath the ribbon. He unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was delicate but unfamiliar. "To whoever loves him, you may never know what truly happened that night. Maybe it doesn't matter anymore. All that matters is that he grows up surrounded by kindness, not questions. A child doesn't belong to those who birth him, but to those who see him, who truly hear his silence. If you ever hear him sing, know that it's not just his voice. It's the past finding peace." "Grace." Ethan's eyes filled again, but this time the tears didn't sting. He folded the letter, placing it back inside the box like something sacred. Then he whispered to the empty room, "He's safe now. You can rest." That evening, the three of them drove to the cliffs overlooking the ocean, the same place Ethan used to go when business drowned him and silence became his only refuge. The wind was soft, the waves catching the orange fire of the sunset. Adam stood between them, clutching their hands, looking out at the vast horizon. "She's not coming back, is she?" he asked. Ethan looked down at him gently. "No, son. She's home now." Adam thought for a moment. "Then can I still sing her song?" Claire's voice trembled. "Always." As the sun sank into the water, Adam began to hum again. The same melody, that had once haunted their nights now felt different, lighter, almost like a prayer. Ethan closed his eyes, listening. Each note seemed to wash over him, dissolving the anger, the guilt, the broken years of silence. What remained was something purer, understanding. He thought of how easily love can blur into possession, how truth can hide beneath good intentions, how silence can wound more deeply than words ever could. He realized that being a father wasn't about who the child belonged to. It was about who stayed, who chose to keep listening even when no sound came. As the last light faded, Ethan turned to Claire, his hand finding hers. "We can't undo what we've done," he said quietly, "but maybe we can learn to live with it and let it mean something." Claire nodded. "We already have." The sea roared below them, vast and endless. Adam kept humming softly, and the wind carried his voice out over the cliffs, blending it with the sound of the waves until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Ethan smiled faintly through his tears. For years, he had measured his life in profits, schedules, and deadlines. But now, watching his son sing to the fading sky, he realized what silence had been trying to teach him all along, that some miracles aren't meant to be explained, only felt. When they finally turned back toward the car, Adam stopped, glancing over his shoulder one last time. "Dad," he said softly, "do you think she can hear me?" Ethan looked at the horizon where the sea met the sky and whispered, "I think she always could." And as they walked hand in hand down the path, the house in the distance stood still against the darkening sky, not haunted anymore, not burdened by secrets, just home. If you found this story powerful, make sure to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Your support helps us bring more important stories to light.